Welcome to the latest in our series of free webinars from Skillex Education, broadcasting live from Tallinn in Estonia. My name is Jim Sharman, host for today, but our presenter is also on screen. I have the great privilege to introduce to you Sheetal Kaka Mehra from India.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
India's leading executive presence coach. And Sheetal, you have an amazing background of experience with people you've worked with for such a long time, and you have best-selling publications through Amazon. You're a celebrated speaker in your own right, and I'm very glad that you joined us today. Just a quick message to everybody watching, though. If you're new to this, it's usually nice just to post where you're joining us from. I know we have a lot of people today from India, so you're all welcome, of course, and some of our regulars from places like Trinidad and Slovenia and Sweden. And I know that you're going to be talking to us today about a very exciting topic, Sheetal, but what interests me most right now, many of the people watching probably know you already, but many don't. So for example, the Skillex audience, this may be their first experience of you. Could you briefly introduce yourself to everyone and what you do and why this topic is important to you and how you got into it?
Superb. Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. And thank you to all the audience who have dialed in from different parts of the world. So why do I believe in executive presence? Now, I have more than 2 decades of experience. I have trained possibly over 75,000 people across Asia and have trained and coached more than 1,000 CXOs. And I was studying leadership for over 2 decades. And how has it changed? How has it evolved? And what are the basics which have remained the same? So many things have changed, many things have evolved, and yet some things never change. So I studied executive presence, and I wanted to understand that besides technical skills and intellectual skills, what are the leadership skills which are relevant, important, regardless of the era? So I started researching. I spoke to maybe more than 120 entrepreneurs, industrialists, business leaders, people from all walks of life, even architects and angel investors. And finally, I came up with a formula, which is the poise formula for leadership that we'll, of course, discuss in more detail. But I do believe that while business capability is critical and it is the foundation of your career and your business success, but there are various other skills which are needed and are critical and which are important. So yes, that is where the journey started. And, it is a mysterious element. It's easy to spot and yet tough to define. So when I ask people about executive presence, they would say, yeah, so-and-so has it. Barack Obama was a very top favorite. Kamala Harris was very on top of the charts when it came to women leadership. But when I asked them to define it, it was mysterious. So I thought it's time to have a research-backed formula. So that's where the journey started.
That's fantastic, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about this model that you've created, and we will get into that shortly. So thank you for that introduction. I'm also looking forward to learning a few tips and hints from yourself about how I can improve my own presence. So I'm as much student as I am presenter today, so thank you for that. Just a quick reminder to all of you watching, you may post your questions at any point you like into the chat. We will have a scheduled Q&A at the end, where I'll publish selected questions. But if you have a question that you want to ask straight away, please drop it into the chat. And if it's relevant at that time, I'll bring it directly in, and then Sheetal can answer it directly. If you're watching on Facebook and you want to post a question, please do that. Post it into the Facebook chat. But anything that we missed today, anything that doesn't get answered, that's okay. We only have a limited amount of time, and we can only usually scratch the surface of the subject here. So these webinars serve as a fantastic introduction to the topic, and the invitation is already out there to Sheetal to go deeper perhaps with us, but we'll see what happens with that. Watch this space. Okay, so we prepared a few questions. So Sheetal, I'll ask you the first one if I may, and it's starting right from the very beginning here. We've pitched this as being a skill that's necessary for today's world. So in today's times, it's become all the more important to know how to carry yourself in a leadership position, how to get that gravitas. And you've come up with a theory around it and a model. Could you please explain this poise model to us?
Super. I always tell people, ask yourself 3 questions. First one, do people pay attention when you speak? Second one, do team members, peers, sometimes even clients and bosses ask you for your opinion? And finally, do you remain calm during a crisis? That's where executive presence steps in. Now, some of you, all those who answered yes to all the 3 questions, can leave the room because they have gravitas or executive presence. Gravitas is a Latin word for weight, which means that somebody who carries their weight into the room, literally translated. So yes, if you answered yes to all the 3 questions, there's nothing more I can teach you. But if you answered yes to 1 or 2 of those questions or no to all the 3, then this is a wonderful chance for you to upgrade and enhance your executive presence. So what exactly is it? Like I said earlier, it's mysterious. It was an it factor. It had to be backed by a scientific formula or a model. So research base came up with the poise formula. It's a blend of your physical presence, your online presence, which has become critical in today's world, your influencer skills, because regardless of the era, a leader's role has always been to motivate, inspire, and influence. Your stage presence, your communication skills, your ability to articulate and communicate a thought such that your audience can understand it in the first chance itself. And the E stands for your engagement presence, your ability to connect with people. Internally, of course, it's workplace relationships, it's your interaction with your bosses, senior leadership, and externally, you as a brand ambassador of your firm. So the entire formula is the poise formula for leadership.
So
And
remind
yes,
us again what they stand for. So P is for physical presence.
physical, O is for online,
Online.
I is for influencer skills,
Influences.
S is your stage presence, and E is your engagement presence.
Engagement. Okay. So that's
So yes,
that's why you called it poise, and it's a
poise.
great choice of word as well.
Thank you. Yes, somehow it fell into place. It wasn't by design, it was by default, but the research somehow led to that. And yes, it's easy to remember. And it stands for various aspects of executive presence, which I've explored in my research. So, yes, of course, sorry.
I don't believe in coincidences, by the way. So if it led that way, it led that way for a reason. Maybe we can call that kismet.
Yeah, that's an Indian word you used.
So, we described this initially in the promotional as an intangible asset, meaning it's something that can't be touched. But if the P stands for physical, does physical presence really matter in today's world?
You know, packaging matters. Companies know this. They spend billions of dollars every year on packaging their products and services. And it's very interesting, but they don't spend that much time or energy in packaging their people. So I always tell people, you are the CEO of your own brand, and your physical presence or packaging matters.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. We judge a book by its cover. We are very charmed by fine dining restaurants with well laid out tables. And most of us do believe in love at first sight. So, first impressions matter. Secondly, the human brain is constantly thin slicing. The psychologists in this virtual room will tell us what it is in detail, possibly in the chat box. But the fact is that we form opinions and pass judgments by thin slicing, which is condensed sections, condensed bits of information, and we are quick to pass judgment. In fact, let's be honest. When a person walks into the room, a stranger, before they have even uttered a word, we have formed opinions and passed judgment. We may not verbalize it or we may not speak it out, but about their economic strata, possibly their nationality, geography, their competence, level of capability, educational background. So, first impressions matter, and physical presence is an integral component of that. I always tell people in today's competitive world, on a 100-mark paper, even if you give 10 marks to physical presence, the way I look at it is you can't afford to leave it to chance. Every point matters. So, this is an integral component. And physical presence also includes non-verbal communication, or what we commonly call as body language. It also includes the energy you bring into the room. That's
Mm.
an intangible. Leaders walk into a room, they energize the room, and they change the dynamics within the room. In fact, it's also the space that you take up in people's minds long after you have left the room. So there's an intangible there as well. Even body language. Think about it. We have never been coached or trained, but 55% of communication with a stranger is body language. So
That's right.
that's also important. Leaders are aware. In my research, I realized that leaders have a very high level of self awareness when it comes to executive presence. They knew that body language is critical, how to synchronize your verbal and your non-verbal communication, the gestures, the posture, the facial expressions which are synchronized with your words. All that makes a difference.
Eye contact as well.
Eye contact as well. And this is where it is even more critical, which is that leaders have fine tuned their ability to read a room, which is purely based on non-verbal cues and the dynamics within the room. So whether it is eye contact, does a person, in fact, one of the leaders told me that, they were signing an agreement, but every time few words showed up, the person on the other side didn't maintain eye contact. And he said, I knew something is going to go wrong over here. In terms of even deception, lying, hiding, shady, mysterious, so many things that you can figure out. In fact, you know something, I firmly believe that if you can read a room, it can save you tons of time, energy, and resources,
Yes.
both in your personal and professional life. So, executive presence crosses the border on that as well. Of course, we would love to hear from the readers if they agree, disagree, or their thoughts on this.
It's interesting you say that because we already have a comment from one of our viewers. Sunaina says, I disagree because in longer term, your physical presence does not matter. Imagine a person dressed well, but doesn't know anything about communication. Now,
Yes.
from my point of view, I can see why that comment's been made. Would love to get your opinion as well. And is it okay if I chip in as well with the occasional observation?
Of course, would love to.
But I'll give you
You
the floor
know,
first, always.
yeah, I agree. Content is king. Okay, but that is the foundation on which your career is built.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't not have content. That is a large chunk of it. That's why, if you remember, I said it could be possibly 10% of the impact that you create. But in today's competitive world, physical presence, even if you give it 10%, it's important for you to get an 8 or a 9 to take you into the high 90s. So content could possibly be 50%, could be 60%.
Mm-hmm.
Technical skills, intellectual skills, and hard work are critical for success. And they are a large chunk of it. But now, how do you gain a competitive edge? And this is where this steps in.
Okay, thank you. There's a follow-up comment from the same person. In most companies in 2020 and 2021, video mode is off, so it's what you bring to the table. The facade doesn't matter anymore. And again, I see the point that when you turn video off, you can't see the person. But physical, from my point of view, is more than just seeing; it's also hearing.
Yes. See, first of all, if you turn the way I look at it is in a face-to-face world, which was pre-COVID, where all of us met and interacted with each other, there's so much more that we could take in when it comes to communication. Now, the sad part is that if you are on a screen, you're possibly seeing only 20% of the person's body. So a lot of non-verbal signals are switched off. On the other hand, if you switch off the video, then you're focusing so much more only on the audio. It's like this. The levels of escalation are very clear. The best interaction is always face to face. The next best option is a video chat because sense of touch and smell is gone. The third best option then is an audio because now you can't see the person and the visual is completely compromised. And the worst option in communication is an email where you can't see the person and you can't hear the person. So yes, if you have a very strong in-person communication, let's say with a team member, you're interacting with them constantly, you can switch the video off because of the fact that you had a good in-person relationship or have built the bond. But to build bonds, to build bridges, to build relationships, you are adding a layer to communication, and a critical layer if you're visible.
Yes, visible and audible. And if you have neither, then all you're relying on is written. And that's where you come back to this idea that content is.
The two most frequently heard comments in the questions in the last 14 months have been, am I audible? Am I visible?
It's not impossible to build your presence without audiovisual cues. It's just harder. And anyone who's worked in email marketing will understand this one. You can send out 1,000 emails and get one reply. So yes, thank you for emphasizing the point about non-verbal communication. Just out of interest, many people talk about percentages, like 55% visual, 38% verbal, and vocal, sorry, and 7% verbal. Do you have any figures on the difference between vocal and verbal when you can't be seen?
No, I don't. I don't have that research. I'm being honest with you, and I would not want to put numbers on the table unless I had myself researched.
Okay, that's fair. I thought I'd ask the question. Okay, so given that there is clearly there's always going to be differences of opinion about what is most important and what matters the most, and that's great because that encourages healthy debate. So let's continue the debate. Your answer about physical presence has been clear. So how important is it for someone to build their online presence, given that you can't physically be there? And given that there may well be changes or challenges around being seen and heard online. So tell us a bit more about online presence.
2 decades ago, leaders were not on the internet because the world was very different. There was so much more media interaction and possibly interviews on television. Today, most leaders have understood the importance of a strong online presence. And they've also learned the hard way that it is a bit of a fishbowl existence. So even if you're not a celebrity, but you're a professional, a star performer, an entrepreneur, a member of a startup team, or a B school student, yet you still need to have, in today's world, a strong online presence. Why? Because we e-meet people before we meet them. And based on what we see on the screen, we form opinions. And based on that, we may actually decide to hire, promote, retain, and do business with people. So your e-presence, your presence online has become very important. Now, interestingly, what is relevant in today's world is that in the last 14 months, it's become even more important because earlier you had a strong in-person interaction and then you backed it with an online presence. Initial months, we only interacted with people we knew from before. But today, we have started interacting with complete strangers who we may possibly never meet. So I always tell people, put your name into Google and see what shows up. In fact, something interestingly, millennials even told me that based on their e-line presence, based on someone's online presence, they decide whether they want to meet them, interact with them, date them. One person said possibly marry them. So I don't know what are the boundaries, but yes, a strong online presence is an asset and people are going to use that for or against you. So I always tell people, curate your online presence or give it some thought.
Good advice. And speaking of advice, this is a great example of what to do. As a fellow coach and trainer, I'm also very interested in how you do it. So could you possibly give us 3 tips, your 3 top tips on how to build a strong online presence?
First of all, put your name into Google, as I said, and see what shows up. This is what the world is using. Could be images, could be information, could be interaction, could be how you're tagged. And that is what they are using to form an opinion. Good, bad, doesn't matter. I'm not being judgmental. But those are the words that pop up in people's minds. So first of all, let's get back to the tools. Understand the sites. LinkedIn is a purely business networking site. On the other hand, Facebook and Instagram have a social element to it. Twitter is used by a lot of business leaders to share their thoughts, ideas, and with a lot of professionals and young people today. But understand each of the sites and understand what they are used for. Also, if you are going to be a private person, then I would suggest create opaque walls between your personal and your professional life. So, technically, anybody who you know as in your social set should not really be on too many professional sites with you. On the other hand, people you know in professionally, unless you are okay, they should not get a peep into your personal life. Secondly, understand the privacy settings, because if you are leaving it as an open profile, then the world is watching and people are forming judgments and passing comments. And if that's okay with you, then understand the rules of the game. Secondly, if you're a professional, please understand the social media policy of the organization that you work for, because your comments cannot be in conflict with your employer's comments. There are legal implications, as well as, of course, lots of careers have been ruined because of breach of that. So please understand that as well. Secondly, you are the CEO of your own brand. So write down your positioning. All brands have a positioning. That's very critical when you start marketing, selling, promoting them. I always tell people, write down the 3 words that should pop up in people's mind when they see your online presence. When I was made to do this exercise, my 3 words were: 1, providing cutting edge information about my industry. 2, was viewed as an expert. And the third one was to be accessible and available to people who would like to connect with me and discuss, explore, interact, and answer their questions. So those were my 3 words. So I would highly recommend that listeners, if you want to curate your online presence, start with 3 words or possibly 3 phrases if you're very particular. Finally, network online. It's very important for you to connect. Many times I ask people, why don't you connect with people online? And the fear of rejection, which always existed in person, exists online as well. I had the same fear. When I launched my book last year, when I started connecting with people, I wasn't sure. I said, what is a digital launch? How will I connect with people? But the fact is that I have coached people today sitting on the East Coast, on the West Coast, in South Africa, Japan, and Australia. So the world is your oyster. The good thing with online is that today the world has become flat. And sitting in your own home, you can connect, network, pick up so much knowledge, information, and interact with people in different corners of the world. So yes, technology has been a game changer. We would love to hear what our listeners and our audience has to say.
Please do. Yeah, please share your experiences of how you have built your own personal online presence. By the way, if you put my name into Google, you get an Australian film director. But I'm hoping that'll change soon. So one of the things I heard in this was understand how each social media platform is used. But there's always going to be a generational shift there too. Even within the last year or two, there's been a big shift. I mean, I used to teach English in Austria to teenagers, and they were all telling me that Facebook is so past for them. They're all using TikTok now. Yeah. What experience have you had about how you can shift your understanding of which social media platform to use for personal and professional presence? And what direction do you think it's heading in?
That it's like working with a moving target. It's constantly changing, evolving. But I do believe that one has to understand where your own personal boundaries are, your own thoughts, your own limits. Because many times I see people ranting and lots of comments on religion and politics, which anyway ignite a lot of passion. And now, if you're an activist, yes, sure. If you're somebody who is connected, yes, sure. But understand your connect and your industry, your job, your audience, your client before just posting comments, because The web definitely has an elephant's memory. And once something is there, it's there permanently, possibly captured, unless you try, which I don't understand how to delete. But the fact is that, yes, you have to be conscious and aware and have, have your wits about you when it comes to posting, interacting, liking, or any kind of ranting. So the world is changing, and we have to keep changing with the world. But you have to be aware, build a high level of self-awareness.
That was a really good comment I just heard in there, by the way, and I'm going to remember this one. The web has the elephant's memory.
Yeah.
And so what you put out there is permanent. And there's also a record. If you put out a tweet and you delete that tweet, then then the history records that you deleted that tweet. You can't erase what you've done. So be careful what you do.
And somebody could have captured it. Someone could have retweeted it. Somebody could have taken a screenshot of it. There's so many different ways that it could always be there.
That's right. And screenshotting and saving JPEGs of those screenshots is very common. There are actually people out there whose job it is to troll what a famous person writes. So there's always a permanent record. So the more presence you have online, the more scrutiny you are under. Correct?
Yeah, true.
Okay. I'm just going to skip a question because I want to stay on topic. There's a point been made here. I'm going to bring this question in. I know we have a Q&A at the end, but we have encouraged you to share your questions with us. So I'm going to just put one on screen right now.
Yes.
This has come in from Atul. How to make my digital footprint? I can't see me in a number of Google pages, not even my pictures there. So that leads me on to a question that I wanted to ask you already anyway, about virtual presence. So we're discussing how important virtual presence is. What are the 3 most important ways you can think of to upgrade your virtual presence so people like Atul can increase their digital footprint?
You have to contribute, and you have to contribute in a meaningful way. So go back to the drawing board and figure out what are the topics of interest, because you have to be authentic. Even on the internet, if you are inauthentic or a fake, it is very easy for people to spot based on your tweets. So your authentic self has to be. And we can only be authentic about something that we are passionate about or are very interested in. So choose topics, curate them, think about what you're going to write. Possibly could be a post, could be an article, could be something that you're sharing, resharing. So get that sorted, first of all. Secondly, have meaningful conversations with people. So that is very important, because people have to view you as someone who contributes in some way if you want to leave a better footprint. Otherwise, it's just a lot of ranting. There's so much garbage out there that is very difficult for people to sift. So add impact as you would in a face-to-face interaction. Add impact. Be of value. Add value in terms of what you contribute. So yes, coming back to virtual presence, I would say that, on the screen, there is your visual presence. Now, it's important. I always tell people that the pandemic has reduced us to making films literally of ourselves. So lighting matters. Camera positioning matters. Brands need investments. You are the CEO of your own brand.
It's a great
Brands
line.
need promotion. Make investments in yourself in case you need a better camera, you need better noise cancelling headphones, a better chair. I had to buy an ergonomically designed chair because of the fact that so many hours of sitting. I never budgeted for that. I had a poor Wi-Fi connection in my home and a much better one in my office. And I had to make an investment in that after the pandemic. So yes, visual is very important. Also, I would suggest that if you are going to activate the camera, especially as we said in the first few interactions, dress for the job you want. And that is very important. People have expectations based on your job, your industry, your position. The closer you are to the industry standard, the higher your chance of success. So keep that in mind. And finally, it even works at a biochemistry level. When you know you're dressed for work, your mind automatically shifts to the work mode. When you wear workout clothes, you are in the mode to exercise. And when you wear chill clothes, you want to watch Netflix. So it works. Secondly, Verbal communication. That's very critical. Are you communicating effectively on a screen? And here I would like to share something which I've been researching on a lot in the last few months, which is introverts and extroverts, how they have taken the pandemic.
Mhm.
Introverts have, some of them have gone into a bigger shell. Extroverts, on the other hand, are missing the buzz and at times are too verbose and take up too much of the airtime. And the ambiverts, on the other hand, how are they taking it? Some are not speaking, some are speaking. Then, of course, there are cases of harassment, bullying. So we have all been reduced to a 2 by 2 style on someone's screen, and it is very difficult to retain attention. So I think it's important that we appreciate that. Finally, voice, your verbal. Never in the history of the corporate world has voice been more important than now. Speak loudly, clearly, slowly, and with energy. Step on the gas when it comes to energy, because in in-person interaction, there's so much more of you that people can see. Whereas on a screen, energy and enthusiasm conveys. In fact, it bounces off and it energizes the room. Are you monotonous? Are you boring? Because now you're competing with their home, the rest of the room. So retaining attention is also very difficult versus sitting in a conference room. So take pauses, put energy, sound interesting, make it nice and lively for people, make it fun. People are going through trouble. So I think communication style has changed on a screen, and your executive presence in the virtual world also has to keep pace with that.
Absolutely. So packed full of advice here. I'm actually getting some advice from you too, so I'm going to be reflecting later on what I've learned already. I was always concerned about being too energetic on camera because the camera picks everything up. So what was your advice to someone who is really energetic but doesn't want to be distracting to so I can be energetic but I need to calm down at the same time? It all sounds very zen.
Yes, too much, of course, energy is a good thing. So that definitely gives you an edge. But if you combine energy with too many hand gestures or movement, then you distract your audience. So that is the only thing. But energy is a great thing, Jim. It works.
So should I put my energy more through my voice than my gestures?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. A few gestures are good. But yes, more through the voice, I think it energizes the room better.
Great. Next question. And this is more a kind of, I think this is more relating to a recruitment strategy, I guess. But what are the attributes that you believe organizations seek in their employees these days? And what can one do to harness their qualities, particularly when they're applying for roles, for example?
Working remote, I think, has currently is the new normal. But if you ask me honestly, will we ever go back to 100% working in the office the way we were doing a few months ago, or possibly early last year? I don't know, and I don't think so. I personally believe that a hybrid model will emerge where we'll have face-to-face interactions. Possibly some functions will work remote. So the hiring also and the skills needed also have to keep pace with that. First of all, inculcate self-discipline, because micromanaging by bosses has become passe. Now, deliverables are defined and you can deliver them. Deadlines are strict and you will have to stick with the deadlines. So, the fact is that self discipline has become extremely important. There's so much burnout. Creating walls between your personal time and your professional time and sticking to that. Staying fit has become very important. So many things. So I think self discipline, inculcating self discipline is a critical skill. Secondly, going forward, we are going to be collaborating and working and interacting and communicating with more and more teams who are sitting in different parts of the world. Earlier, it used to be parts of the world. Now, it could possibly be different parts of the city, country, even same area, but people are sitting in different areas. So, we have to learn to collaborate. So the ability to work with people and collaborate with people by communicating effectively. And if you ask me, the number one influencer skill is effective listening. We
Effective
have to
listening.
brush up. Yes, we have to brush up our listening skills. So we'll have to focus on that. We'll also have to focus on certain enhanced communication skills, like we spoke, more enthusiasm since body language is compromised, more energy, even encouraging participation. If you see somebody on the screen who's not speaking, getting everybody to share their ideas will become a critical leadership skill. Earlier, the role of a leader was possibly authoritative, moved to democratic. Now, the role is that of a collaborative person. Facilitate it, make it easy for your team members to be productive. Finally, transparency, building trust has also become important because now in a remote world, how do you build trust? That so I think many skills have changed, evolved, and the focus areas have changed. Would love to hear what our audience have to say. If they can add to this set, it'll be wonderful.
We have questions piling in. I'm just scanning them, looking for ones to ask right now. I'll come back to a few at the end. We won't have time to answer every question today. I apologize for that. So I'm going to need to be selective.
You
but
know,
select
I
one.
can give them an option. They can write to me, DM me on Twitter or on Facebook, and I will try my level best. I don't promise a 24-hour response, but I will definitely personally answer all the questions.
And also, you can drop the question into the Facebook feed.
Yes.
Because the Facebook feed will outlast this Get Response live broadcast. I do want to bring a quick question here because I had the same question. This is from Dilmid Singh Sarni. Can you give a few suggestions for improving listening skills?
Yes. First of all, stop speaking. That's the best way to listen. Secondly, I tell people that it's very basic, but yes, there's a fun element that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So whenever you want to listen, 2/3 listening and 1/3 speaking. Also, believe that you don't have all the answers, and the best of ideas can come from the junior most of people in your team. And in turn can come up with the best idea. You never know. So unless you stop speaking and invite suggestions, people are not going to open up. So create an environment where people feel empowered. They feel, it's an open environment and they can speak up. So I think it's up to the leaders. It's a trickle down effect, but I do believe that listening is a very powerful tool and should definitely be polished and enhanced.
There's a phrase I use in my own coaching, which is the key to effective listening is practicing the art of listening in order to understand someone's reality rather than waiting your turn to speak. And this comes in a follow-up from a viewer called VHD. How do you balance between being a great listener?
How do you balance between being a great listener versus balancing that everyone gets airtime?
Yes.
That's up to leadership and what is being discussed. There is no formula. But the fact is that as long as everybody gets a chance to speak and is not editing their thoughts or controlling completely, and encourage participation, get people out of their shell and say, well, what do you feel about? Sometimes, you have to get people out and say that, what do you feel about what we've discussed so far? And you'll be shocked as to what they say. So I think it is important for the leader. As I said earlier, it's a trickle down. And if you are in a leadership position, or if you are grooming yourself, or have, would like to be in a leadership position, this is one skill that you should start focusing on right now.
Definitely.
How to improve your listening skills.
Intelligent question.
Most people are non-listeners. Some are marginal listeners. They hear a few buzzwords. Some are evaluative listeners, but they say the best category of listeners are what we call as active listeners. Those who listen and also watch for non-verbal cues, because communication is a combination of verbal and non-verbal. Words we can still, be smart with, but most of us are not trained actors to fool people with non-verbal cues. So take in the entire experience. The best compliment you can pay anybody is listen to them.
The best compliment you can pay anybody is to listen
Would
to
love
them.
to hear more.
Excellent.
In case
Right
our
now,
audience has something to contribute.
yes, right now, Sheetal, we are in a position where we are forced to listen because we can't see you.
Good to be back in the room. Yes.
Welcome back. So you were talking about maintaining this balance, and I was just looking through the list of questions to see what we could do with. I still need to ask the question earlier, and I was just about to give some advice about it, which is, what can one do to control excitement and stay calm instead of letting your emotions take over? So take this for example.
So
We've just had a discussion with
who has
technology.
asked this question, and I'm sure it's many other people were thinking about the question. How do you build executive maturity? First of all, what is very critical is to build self-awareness. Understand your triggers. All of us have internal triggers, which could be related to childhood experiences, relationships, anything which is related to us. So it's all internal. Then, of course, there are external triggers, like possibly the internet being down, or a colleague, or a client could trigger you. Some person's personality could trigger you. So write down your triggers. The first step is understanding yourself. Build self-awareness. What really triggers you? Once you figure that out, then you have to figure out how are you going to control it. People have different methods. The simple method of counting till 10. Some people do meditation. Jim spoke about Zen. So you figure that out for yourself. Different things work for different people. But the step one is to understand your triggers. And let me tell you one thing, most people don't even understand that. So make a list. Every time you get upset and something bothers you, write down what bothers you. And you know something, you will see that they are the same things over and over again. So I think the first step is diagnosis. Like in any other, like in the medical world, the first step to treating anything, diagnosis is critical. That's when it's the first stage of treatment. So yes.
Thank you. I understand that we now have a little bit of a lag, so I'm going to pause to make sure that I can make my question at the right time. I have a question to you personally, Shita. When you said about understanding what triggers you, can we personalize this? And what was your biggest learning point in this area? And mine, for example, was when things like this happen, it's important to breathe and stay calm.
Yes, for me, an external trigger is people who are dishonest, or I have a question mark on their integrity. Mm-hmm. So the minute I feel that comes into play, I get today people call it triggered. Yes, I do get triggered by that. And internally, of course, each of us has our own personal journey, our childhood experiences, and many things. But understanding that everybody's unique, understanding that we are all work in progress, nobody is perfect, and mm-hmm. understanding what is the trigger is very important. So that, I think, once you get that down, you will realize that it's the same things, as I said, over and over again. The same 80-20 formula applies there as well, and you will be able to work out something. But diagnosis is critical.
I think Robin's just said that a successful diagnosis will provide the best possible therapy. I like that.
Super.
From my point of view, the biggest trigger I had was panicking if things aren't going to plan. And this is something I wanted to pick up on one of the comments earlier, which is I've actually taken as quite an interesting challenge. Why do people in our position, and we might call ourselves professionals and experts, why do we still rely on notes? I have my own answer to that. And I am reading notes. So do you have a response to that, Sheetal? Why do we still use notes?
Okay, I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint, but I do definitely believe in using a few notes, because I believe that, it gives me a sense of control, that these are the things that I can then share definitely. And it also makes it easier for me, because otherwise I have to commit so much more to memory. So I feel that, it is these things help me get better organized. So yes, they do definitely keep me calmer, if that is what it is. Not having notes is a trigger.
Good response. From my point of view, I want to make sure I've got notes so that I can make sure that the best possible content is being. You said earlier, content is king.
Yeah.
And the content that drives this particular webinar today is a series of questions that are aimed at you being able to explain to people how they can make the best of their presence. So I have another one for you.
Okay.
Professionals find it difficult to engage with people. What are your 3 tips for networking and building relationships, particularly within the context of a question that came in from Chandran just now? And I want to publish this one because I think it's part of the same question.
Okay.
And it was how do you improve, how do you handle a situation of executive presence when you are moving into a new organization and you don't know the culture and the people? Any suggestions?
In organizations, cultural fit is critical. And the way I look at it is, when you join a new organization, take a step back, become an observer, understand why are people behaving the way they do, and you will spot a trend. But take a step back and understand people's behavior, because there will be a certain commonality when it comes to interactions. How do people communicate? Are they formal? Are they informal? Is there a passive aggressive culture? Is it aggressive? So, make your notations. I always tell people the first 90 days in a job, make notes, even if it is just words, points, phrases, or mental notes, but make notes and understand why do people behave the way they do. It'll give you unique insights. So before you start going there and changing things and saying, you come with a wealth of experience and, depth of knowledge, but this is a different organization, and every organization, like every home, has its own culture. And if you want to build a long-term career there, it's very important that you understand culture. In all my years of experience of coaching, I've noticed that organizations only promote people who fit in with their culture. After a point, technical skills, intellectual skills become hygiene factors. Now it is, what more do you bring to the table? So understanding organization culture is critical if you're looking at your career long term in that setup. So yes, coming back to your question, which is 3 tips for building networks.
Yes.
I firmly believe that visibility increases opportunity. Every interaction is a wonderful chance for you to display your executive presence. Could be a meeting or a casual conversation at the coffee machine or the water cooler. Could be a networking event or a 5-minute quick chat, informal chat before the start of a meeting. But every interaction is a wonderful opportunity to increase your visibility and to create impact. And research has backed my statement, because it categorically says that when it comes to promoting people, even to the CEO's role, internal and external visibility is a critical factor. So, visibility increases opportunity, and it definitely is wonderful if you want to go up the corporate ladder. So, 3 points that I would like to share. 1, networking is like farming and is not like hunting. Hunting means boom, food on the table. Farming, on the other hand, is investment of time, energy, and resources, and requires patience. So, invest in people. Secondly, networking is like banking. First, you need to make a deposit before you are allowed to withdraw. On the other hand, most people join a network trying to figure out what they can take from it without giving anything back. That's not going to work. So, everybody in your network has got aspirations, goals. You can help them achieve that. You can be a part of the journey. You can help them in any small or big way that you can. First, earn the credit before you ask for a withdrawal. And finally, don't live in the fear of rejection. Most people live in the fear of no. So they don't reach out to people. Tap into people's knowledge, resources, give and take, connect with people, have wonderful conversations. Sometimes I ask people, why don't you connect? There are 200 people in this room. Why aren't you talking to someone? And it's the fear of rejection, the fear of no. What is the worst that they can do? They'll say no. Okay, move on. Their loss, not yours. So yes, those are the 3 tips.
3 great tips: farm, bank, connect. I like that. I like that. You just mentioned the corporate ladder. According to you, climbing the corporate ladder is a two-stage journey, which is something I've heard you mention. Could you elaborate on that? What is this two-stage journey about?
I believe that climbing the corporate ladder is like climbing Mount Everest. If you, I'm sure there are mountaineers, trekkers, hikers in this virtual room, and they will agree with me that if you ever try climbing the Everest, it's a two-step journey. First, you walk to the base camp, which is, I think, some roughly 17,000 plus feet, and then you spend a couple of days there, possibly more, depending on how you acclimatize.
Mm-hmm.
And then you attempt the summit, which is 29,000 plus feet. So it's a two-step journey. The skills needed to reach the base camp are very different from the skills needed to reach the summit.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, in the corporate world, the skills needed, there is a certain base camp. Depending on your competence, industry, job, some people reach it at the age of 30, 32, 35, 40. But after a point, there is a base camp, and the skills needed to reach the base camp in the corporate world are tons of technical, intellectual, as well as a lot of hard work. But once you reach the base camp, these become hygiene factors, which means if they are there, they are not visible. If they are not there, you wouldn't be where you are. So now, what more to reach the summit? This is where executive presence kicks in.
Okay. So I have just seen two questions that come in that are relating to this, and I'd like to ask them both to you, if I may. This is the first one. I think the first one is about the skills required to reach base camp. So would you consider it all right to approach a hiring manager or an HR manager via LinkedIn about an open position that you may have come across in the company website? Do you think that makes you pushy or proactive?
If it is openly advertised and there is the address that is given or an email address, I would suggest you should connect with them. On the other hand, if you already know the hiring person, then definitely you can put in a word. But to just cold call or blank send an email saying, I'm interested in this, brings me back to the same banking principle of networking, because you don't know this person from earlier and they know exactly why you're connecting. But if you have a connector in between, let's say you go to their LinkedIn profile and you realize that you know somebody in common who's a good friend of yours, you can reach out to that person and say, hey, there's this person in your network. They are looking for a position that I'm interested in. Can you put us in touch via email? So yes, but otherwise just expecting favors from people does not work.
So it's a strategy approach. Okay.
Yes.
So you need to be strategic in that one. Okay.
Yes.
So now the second question, which I think refers to your point about going from base camp to summit. How do we showcase our work to managers or senior management without looking like a gloating employee? How can you get comfortable communication to plan your career without being seen as pushy?
A bit of self-promotion works, but it has to be subtle. That's very important. Now, self-promotion, if it is not subtle, then it is seen as aggressive or pushy. So I think what you should do is definitely schedule a coffee with your boss every 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks, have a Zoom or a virtual coffee with them, and tell them all the good work that you have done, your team has done, highlight, showcase it. And of course, don't, what I would say, boast, but definitely bring it to their attention. And sure, and be open and honest and say, what are the areas that I can improve upon, how I can do this better. So look for ideas, be open to feedback, and share the good work that you have done and the good work that your team has done, so that you can give them due credit as well. That's very important. So it's not just you and you, but people around you who've contributed to your success. So that is a better way to do it.
That's a really useful point, because then it becomes less about self-promotion and more about your ability to work within a team, because that's showing leadership quality, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Now, I know time has caught up with us incredibly quickly. I can't believe that. But we had a brief hiatus in the middle. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to run over it by about 5 or 10 minutes just to make sure that we've
Sure.
covered everything that we plan to cover. And there are a couple more questions I can see in the chat I'd like to bring in at the appropriate time.
Sure.
But there is one, I mean, you mentioned earlier that the internet has the elephant's memory. I want to stick with the elephant theme, the elephant in the room. And we haven't spoken too much about it, and that is COVID. So in the COVID world, what are the skills needed in today's zeitgeist? Has leadership changed? Has the COVID situation impacted upon the leadership qualities that you believe that we should have, or have they remained pretty much the same? If they're different, how do we adjust?
You know, it has been the biggest event of this last 100 years. Let's agree. I mean, 7 billion people periodically going into lockdown is something that we haven't seen in our lifetime. So the fact is that this is definitely going to be a life-changing event. And I do believe that leadership has to keep pace with the changing world. So first of all the or the listeners who are looking to have a career in future as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, or whatever that you're looking to lead, I would suggest that first of all, empathy is going to be very critical going forward. First time in the history of the world that we have actually seen the real person behind the title, their home, possibly a pet, a family member, an internet that's not worked, infrastructure which has collapsed, somebody walking past. So earlier we never saw the person behind the title. So yes, I do believe that we should be empathetic, understand people's struggles, a lot of personal loss, damage, mental health issues. So I think we have to have that as a critical leadership skill. Secondly, we have understood the importance of keeping the planet healthy. So, sustainability will be a very critical skill, and very soon, boards and shareholders are going to ask leaders about their vendors, their products, their sourcing. So, yes, what exactly are you doing for the planet, and what are your ethics? Maturity, like we said earlier, is very important. Organizations that have emerged successful is because the leaders have stayed calm under crisis and steered the organizations. Also, leading from the front. It's important. Leaders who have emerged successful have honestly and clearly communicated, whether it is the profit, the loss, the sales number, the lockdowns, the COVID policy, whatever. So, communicating and communicating effectively, frequently, honestly is very important. And finally, I believe that flexibility and being agile is very important as well.
Yeah.
Businesses which have very quickly pivoted from a in-person retail to an online retail, or very quickly gone from one model to another. So business leaders have definitely got to understand that as well. And because it's a fast changing, evolving world, and I think those skills will become critical for hiring, for leading, for delivering, because we don't want leaders who are only going to focus on the profit. Now there are going to be many more skills that people are going to focus on and demand and ask.
I really like the fact that you brought empathy into this, because a question came in from Chandran. I think you've already answered the first part of it, how important is empathy. But in terms of addressing the second part of this question, it reminds me of a point that was made by another one of our viewers earlier about the visual medium when you're online, because most people will look at the screen rather than the camera. I don't know if you've noticed, but I look at the camera whenever I can. If I have the question in my mind, I will look straight into the lens. And for me, that's how I can help build empathy and presence. But
True.
Sheetal, from your own point of view, how would you answer the second part of this question?
How should we infuse empathy?
With presence.
First of all, listen more. Understand the other person's perspective, and also understand where they are coming from. That's very important, if you ask me, because it's not just you, but sitting down and listening to what someone else is saying and what are their challenges and what you can do to help them. I think that's important. So, getting into other people's shoes, like they say, unless you walk in someone's shoes, you can't figure out what their journey has been. I think it's important, and I think we should focus on it. And you know something, it is the good thing is that these are all skills and not traits. Trait is something that you're born with. Skill is something which is learnable. So the good news is that we can all learn it if we focus on it.
Very true. Very good answer. Thank you very much. And Sheetal, the second time that we focused on listening, we lose the picture. So I'm going to take this as a sign from the universe that we should possibly wrap this up. And I know we can't see you right now. If you can try with the settings to get your picture back before I finish saying what I'm saying, then please do. If not, I know you can hear us. And I'm very grateful that you've joined us today and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you so much. So technology has brought us to a conclusion. I know we haven't been able to answer every one of your questions, but those of you who are looking for some more information or some more subject matters, let us know what works for you. Drop us a line, info@skillex.com, or drop a question in the Facebook chat. So it looks like I'm going to have to bring this one to an end. Thank you very much for everyone who joined us today. Please watch this space. We will always have more webinars topics coming up for you. Let us know what you want us to be talking about. Sheetal, if you can hear me, thank you so much. Please stay safe, stay sane, stay healthy. And the same goes to all of you. So I'm going to wrap it up now and wish you all a very pleasant day, evening, wherever you are.